All right, so in my intro, I discussed just simply the notion of what we're talking about when we say Western civilization, or showing it can be a little bit tricky, um, but ultimately that we are going to see that there is a legacy and something that we can define as Western civilization. Uh, we are going to be starting in the middle of the religious wars dealing with the Reformation. And so we're coming into a story, basically, it's like if you watch Game of Thrones or Vikings or any other TV show where there's a story that has something that you need to have watched before to follow what's going on. We don't totally need that, but with history, right? The more knowledge you have as to the background of everything, obviously, the better understanding you're going to have as we're moving forward. Okay, and you can't know it all. I struggle to try to know as much as I can. I teach World Civ. My emphasis was on Middle East history, and that's my strength. But um, I'm teaching also American history, Western Civ. Um, I teach world religions, and I will tell you, I have strengths and I have weaknesses, and in my in what I know the most. And so, but the more we have, any of us, a background, the better ground it will be. So, I just wanted to kind of do a really quick recap of what we covered in the previous class. Okay. So first of all, the beginning of civilization itself, based on the terms I talked about earlier, goes back to around 10,000 BCE. Okay, so we're talking about far back. And civilization as we know it starts in Mesopotamia. That is the land which is now modern Iraq. And that might come as a shock to some of you. It's something that we covered quite thoroughly in my class. Okay, but that is where modern historians place the beginnings from the Sumerian, the Akkadian, the Assyrian, Babylonian kingdoms that are going to come out of that part of the world. Egypt is going to be considered a civilization that is ancient, and it is going to contribute much to the background of Western civilization. And so, just to point out, this has been taught this way for a long time. The Middle East, what we call now the Middle East, and North Africa, where Egypt comes from, is the centers of which the base is going to be starting what we call Western civilization. Okay, and that's something that I think is really good to put in perspective right now, especially in light of the way that the world sees this kind of contrast between East and West. I like to just kind of point that out. Also, is ancient Israel, which I would like to argue, which I don't have time for here now, we might be able to later, should not be necessarily associated with modern Israel. There's a big gap in time. The modern nation state of Israel was founded in 1948, and up until 1914, the Jewish population was still not, it was around 10% of the population. So since the 19th century on, up until 1948, it was Palestine, which was a province in the Ottoman Empire, which was predominantly Arab, Muslim, and Christian, okay? And it's been that way for centuries. The ancient Israel, the biblical Israel, as giving us its religious traditions that are going to evolve into Christianity and even Islam later on, is also an important aspect to Western civilization. Okay, and then we have Greek civilization is of course, one that most people think of and is more straightforward when it comes to the legacy of Western civilization, because here you get the words that a vocabulary that we use. Democracy, the demos is the people, rule by the people. Um, you, then we get influenced by later Roman concepts of a republic and Latin, and if you look at our language, Greece and Rome, and so much of the discourse of politics and history are going to really be straightforward, clearly coming out of those traditions. Okay, and what's going to happen is that from the Roman world, out of the Jewish world, is going to emerge a religion, right, in the first century that we call Christianity. Christianity will be a marginal religion within the empire that is often persecuted. For historians, there's not a lot of clear evidence about exactly what people are believing at the time. There's not the Bible canonized, set in stone of what of what to define what Christianity was in the first century, despite what many people think. If you have questions about that, please feel free to email me. Some will find that to be more of an interesting topic to go into. But eventually, Christianity is going to be embraced by Roman leaders and is going to become tolerated. It goes from persecuted to tolerated to then being the official religion of Rome, and then it's going to be the only religion allowed. So the pagan Roman world is actually going to then persecute all pagans, and it is going to make Christianity the only religion allowed by force, but allowing Jews to remain as a testimony to the supremacy of Christianity and the prophetic power of the legacy of the Jews in terms of what they view to be a prophesying of Christianity. That's something that we'll address later when I talk about Jews in relations to Christians in the Western world. And the very, very difficult life that Jews faced under a Christian majority, while at the same time not being eradicated in the way that pagans were systematically eradicated. And that's something that's often not discussed, that contrast there. Okay, so as this Rome expands itself, Rome is taking on Germanic and Slavic and Celtic tribes people that we could think of much like in the sense of African tribal cultures or Native American. And it's the Roman world that is going to define and write down what they imagine to be these Germanic tribal barbarians, okay? Which those of us from a Germanic, Celtic background or Slavic, it's interesting that the word barbarian is used, a very derogatory term, but now it's kind of almost seen as acceptable. And in fact, it was, one could call it a racist term, but who were these people? They didn't have written language. They were pagan. They had usually a chief, a tribal chief. They didn't have a unified identity. They didn't see themselves as the German people or the Celtic peoples per se. They had tribal loyalties. And again, they fought with Rome on the periphery. Rome would end up defining them. Later on, they will get integrated into the Roman Empire, and they will then take on Roman identity. And then as Rome falls, it is these so-called barbarian peoples that will then take up the Roman legacy and reinvent the Roman as so the German barbarian, the Germanic tribesman, then reinvents the Roman while he was invented by the Roman. Okay, this is what one historian talked about. It's kind of an interesting set of events. And so modern Western Europe becomes born out of all of this. And, I'm kind of oversimplifying many things for the sake of brevity. Okay. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm not going to stop just yet. So then we have the Christian world. The Christian world is split up into East and to West. Okay. And they're eventually going to break apart. I'm not going to have much time to go over that, and I'm just going to say that what we think of as the Western world and Christianity is going to be the Roman Catholic world. Okay, Catholicism will really be the glue that cements together and solidifies what we think of as of Western civilization. But with the power of the church being that kind of glue and anchor that holds down a kind of groundedness for the various people of the Western world, eventually it's going to get challenged. It will no longer have the monopoly of faith and religion. And Martin Luther is just one, but a very important one, a German thinker who is going to come in and just send shockwaves throughout the Western world. And there is going to be an emergence of religious wars and a conflict in the West as to what religion one should follow. And it's going to be entangled with rivalries between various monarchies for power and territory within Europe. Okay. That may have been a lot to try to follow, but I just kind of, I'm doing the best I can for this little short segment here. Hopefully that'll be a little helpful. From now on, I'm just going to then focus on where we're at in the text. Okay. But if there's any question about a segment there, and I'm sure I might have passed over some important things, but feel free to just question me about anything, address anything to me you would like. And I will be glad to go into better details. I will keep repeating in this class that this is a survey course. And survey courses really do require us to skip over a lot of things. And so I'm picking and choosing things to make us have a general idea about where we're at. You'll keep hearing me say that, so just to remind you of what we're doing in this class. Okay? All right, so moving on to the next section.